to test chamber 4. You're doing
Portal. Most people like it, some people don't, but if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that it created a new standard for the first-person puzzle genre. There had been games like it before, but none that garnered nearly as much attention. Its unique story and innovative mechanics made it an instant classic, and as is the case with all popular games in a genre, every other first-person puzzle platform game started copying parts of it. The Talos Principle, Quantum Conundrum, and most recently, Guru Games' new title, Magnetic Cage Closed. Each one of these does something similar to Portal, but Magnetic more so than others. It's a first-person puzzle platform game where you play as a female test subject in a big underground facility. With your hand-operated physics device, you place boxes on big red buttons, while a voice speaks down to you from the intercom, watching you with cameras all over the place. If that's not a blatant copy of Portal's atmosphere, I don't know what is. But Magnetic still somehow makes that feel original with some pretty interesting gameplay. In Magnetic, you solve puzzles by way of the Magnet Gun, a device that allows you to push and pull yourself and other objects in the game like blocks, retractable walls, and certain panels. Magnetism is a pretty rare mechanic to see in games, so it's nice to see gameplay that's actually centered around it. The repulsion and attraction work well and allow for you to do some pretty neat stuff. The magnetism affects both the objects you push or pull and yourself at the same time, so you have to actually be kind of careful in some cases. It creates for a tense experience just from the way the mechanic works. Probably the most enjoyable parts of the magnetism are the panels. You can pull yourself towards them to get across gaps and push yourself away from them to shoot yourself into the air. The puzzles that include these panels feel really cool, and the first time you launch yourself into the air is easily the most exhilarating moment of the entire game. The progression of difficulty, or what's more commonly referred to as a difficulty curve, in a puzzle game is one of the most important aspects of its design. If it's not consistently getting more difficult, it ends up feeling way too easy, and the player will get bored. The difficulty curve of Magnetic is pretty consistent, but it starts off somewhat slow. For Portal veterans, the first 10 or so chambers are way too simple and might deter from the experience, but after that the difficulty ramps up and it becomes much more challenging. Every level either tries something totally new or builds on a previous level by making it more challenging. With every introduction of a new puzzle mechanic, you get a few chambers to try it out and get more used to it, which is extremely important to making a solid puzzle game experience. Once the puzzles started to become more difficult, I found myself having a lot of those satisfying eureka moments where everything just came together perfectly. As challenging as some of the puzzles are though, there's a few issues with them, the main one being that there's a lack of mid-puzzle autosaves. It makes it so every time you die, you have to redo the whole puzzle, which is especially tedious during sections where you have to find the safe path in an insta-kill field. It's not a huge deal since each puzzle is fairly quick to solve, but it can be frustrating when you instantly die on accident. Another gripe I have is this mid-puzzle transition. It's a minor issue again because it's so short, but seeing it at the end of every single puzzle gets a little annoying. It's the equivalent of having 5 to 10 seconds of the same still image at the end of every firefight in a shooter. Clearly it's being used as a form of buffered loading, but that doesn't make it less boring to look at. Even just having a corridor to walk down with some narrative exposition would have been a much more interesting approach to the idea. Speaking of narrative, this game has a really similar outline to Portal's. Like I said earlier, you're a girl in an underground facility doing tests while being monitored by an off-screen character that may or may not be the bad guy. It's pretty cut and dry and basically follows the same progression as Portal, but it falls just short of being as good. The subtlety of Portal is something that doesn't get carried over to Magnetic. It's pretty apparent from the beginning that this place is terrible. The visuals, the constant surveillance, they all tell you right away this is a bad place. Therefore, making the writing on the walls by other prisoners pretty pointless, as it's not really telling us anything we didn't already know. There are also 2 narrators instead of Portal's 1, and as a result, each one never really gets a chance to have any character. The warden is a one-dimensional, unfunny dick, and the psychologist is a cold, calculated machine. They're both constantly switching during different moments, and their writing never allows for them to really have any personality outside of maniacal dick and cold-hearted psychologist respectively. The 2 are exactly like that the whole time until the ending. Or, well, one of the endings. Yeah, Magnetic has multiple endings, which can create for replayability in some games, but it just doesn't work in a puzzle game. These endings exist upon a linear path, so in order to get to every ending, you're going to have to play the same puzzles over and over and over again, and each puzzle is basically solved the same way every time. Some are boring endings with no payoff, and some are actually really interesting and different, so it's a toss-up whether you're going to waste an hour on a cool ending or a lackluster one. I actually liked playing it a bunch of different times to see the different bits of narrative, even if it was minimal, but playing the same puzzles over and over was so boring. If it wasn't for having to play through the same puzzles with the same solutions every time, this would have actually been a nice addition. The limited content that Magnetic has is kind of a big drawback. Once you've completed the linear progression of puzzles and experienced all of the endings, there's nothing else to do. No multiplayer, no extra levels, nothing. This game's begging for more challenging puzzles that utilize the magnetic repulsion and attraction to their full extent. There's some, but it only becomes relevant in the later half of the game. Hopefully in the future there's more content, either from the developers or the community, but for right now there isn't really a whole lot. All in all, I enjoyed the time I had with Magnetic Cage Closed. It scratched an itch I've had long since I finished Portal 2. The puzzle solving is mildly challenging and multi-layered, and the magnetism is such a unique mechanic that I found myself getting wrapped up in just seeing what I could do with it. There just wasn't enough of it there to really play through. My first ending took me about 5 hours to get, but everyone after that was shorter and shorter, and I experienced less and less different content each time. At $15 or 3/4 of the price of Portal 2, it's hard for me to recommend Magnetic without some promise of extra content, which the developers don't seem to have right now. If you're looking for a unique first-person puzzler with a lot of content, Portal 2 is still the better choice, but if you've already played them and you're looking to scratch that Portal-style puzzle game itch, then this Magnetic puzzler is something worth checking out.